Hey, System OG. I'm sorry for the wind. In this video, I'm recording as I'm driving on the highway. So this video is going to be about the distinction between RPG and STG. I did a video last year about that distinction, and I kind of changed my mind about it. When I first encountered that concept of STG, I was reading this great article there is online. If you go, I'm trying to put it in the box below, but if you go for RPG versus STG, you'll get a really good article on Alexandria or something like that, where it's all super well explained. So I'm not going to repeat it all, but I'm going to give some definition. So RPG, role-playing game, would have an emphasis on character development and character choice, you know, over some kind of task resolution in the mechanic, where so the mechanic is mainly oriented toward character decision, character choice, character task resolution, and not so much on the narration and the story. A good example of that is D&D Shadowrun. Lots of good, you know, really traditional RPG. And the STGs have lots of mechanic oriented toward the players taking control of the narration and the story via mechanic. So you're gonna have some kind of dice pool, some kind of economy that the player can utilize to control the story, control the narration. Good example of that is Wushu, maybe Dread, maybe Shock. And the reason why I'm making this video is because the first time I was like, oh God, this is amazing. This is a really good distinction. This is opening my mind, and it did. It really did. It helped me recognize the distinction between, you know, heavy role-playing game based on the kind of mechanic I just described, and the STG, where these games are kind of different. Sometimes they are GM-less, stuff like that. You know, it's really helpful. It's really useful. But, and this is the reason why I'm making this video, the more, a year later, the more I've been using it, I've been around these two words, I tend to realize that STG, even though it is valid as a concept, even though it makes a clear distinction, is culturally, on a cultural level, I want to ask you the question, is it relevant? And so I'm going to make it clear. You know, when you use STG and you talk about an STG, you know, the people who really give a lot of importance to that concept, that distinction, they use it and they understand each other. But in the common sense of the general hobby of role-playing, it creates confusion for some people, and honestly, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like it's the majority that don't get it. They just don't get it, you know. And there's all kinds of stuff. Some people, they get it, but they don't want to utilize it because they don't care. They don't see a distinction. They don't want to make it. They don't want to divide, you know, because those concepts, sorry, those theoretical distinctions over game design and even culture of play create some kind of frictions and some kinds of division between the hobby, you know, because what you're forced to recognize that a lot of people just hate STGs, and a lot of people who went over the STGs, which come later, you know, which are earlier in the culture of role-playing, they spit over the role-playing games, the traditional. Not everybody, but you know, there is those two camp kind of thing. Some people, they go indie, they don't go back, and I'm kind of, you know, I'm almost there myself, so I kind of know what I'm kind of part of that, what I'm talking about here. And the thing is that I feel like even though we understand it and we use it and it helps for good communication when we discuss nitty-gritty details, on a more general perspective, it seems like it's irrelevant because there's a lot of degrees of RPGing and STGing. For example, you have a game like Burning Wheel or Microscope. You know, like if you know, maybe not Microscope, but let's talk about a game like Burning Wheel is a good example, but I'm looking for a game that is right in the middle. I don't have an example right now, but let's take Burning Wheel for example. Burning Wheel has a lot of a traditional RPG and role-playing game in that sense. They have skills and attributes. It has a GM that forces things on the player and stuff. But there's a lot of elements where embedded in the mechanic where the player can take control of the narration for a moment. So it kind of blurs the line between STG and RPG. I will personally say that Burning Wheel is an RPG, but it has a STG element in it. And there's a lot of games like that blur the distinction between the two. Some games, you know, you create your character has advancement, you can play over a long time, and there is a lot of mechanic where the player can take control over the story in it. Lots of them, maybe half of them, you know. I'm lacking an example right now, but there is. So for all these games in betweens, like, it becomes irrelevant. And for the people who grieve over the criticism they get from each of both camp, it's either you want to go deep into the STG and the vocabulary and the technical stuff, and you become just a small group of people who understand each other and care about those distinctions that are really sometimes really unclear. Sometimes they are, you know, like Fiasco, maybe like is it Resistance or Defiance? I don't remember, from Morningstar. You have you know, like I said, Shock and Wushu. These games are, you know, that's what it is. Then you have a super extreme, like maybe like Microscope, where it's even like, can we consider it an RPG? But if you look at, let's say for Shock, for example, you still, even if it's an STG, you still role-playing characters. Even in Fiasco, you still role-playing characters. So it is still, the definition of role-playing game still kind of apply on a more common sense and general level of understanding each other. So basically you get the point. So what I want to say is that when you meet new people in the hobby, you go at a con, or you meet people online, or you meet in some, you know, and you start making those distinctions, and people don't get it because either they never heard about it, or they don't care about it. They understand it, but they don't use it because they don't like the fact that it divides the community and stuff like that. It becomes like a political distinction between two elements of the same spectrum. So my question is, what do you guys think? Do you still think it's relevant to use it, to apply it? Because I've been, this is the funny thing, this is where my intuition for this video comes. I've been hearing game designers, people who design their own game, calling their game something else that some people call it. Like, for example, you know, I heard some people saying that Shock was an RPG, sci-fi role-playing game, and some people know the distinction between STG and RPG. They are game designers, and I talked to people who play Shock, talk about Shock, and they call it an STG. So even knowledgeable people about the distinction don't even apply it. They don't even call it. So sometimes it's just the way you use language, the common sense, that you start applying those definitions on things, and it doesn't really matter because we understand each other anyway. And also, and this is the most important part, is that even in an STG, depending, so you have some really radical STG where you don't even control a character, you really just tell a story together. That's more radical, but still, most of what we call STG have a strong role-playing element in it, that you, at the basic, you know, fundamentals of what you are doing when you play that game is role-playing in character. So how relevant is it to still call it an STG? So that's my question. I'd like to hear what you guys think. Thank you for watching, and yeah, see you soon.